Montana Territory, June 1887. The moon hung heavy over the Bitterroot Mountains, pale and full like a watching eye, as Cora Garrison stood alone beside the white chapel that should have been her beginning. Her wedding dress was dusty around the hem. She had not moved from that spot since sundown. Hours had stretched past. The preacher had gone. The guests had left. The lanterns had burned out. But she stayed, because if she left, it would mean it was real. Russell never showed. The silence was sharp. Coyotes called in the far distance, but no one came up the road. No galloping hooves. No apology. Just the wind pulling at her veil like it, too, wanted her to move on. She had sewn the dress herself over 6 months, every stitch full of hope. He had promised her a life, told her he would build a home on that patch of land east of town. But the land was empty. She had checked. Twice. People whispered that he had been seen riding south 2 nights ago, toward Wyoming, with another woman. A hard breath caught in her chest, and Cora pressed a hand to her stomach. She was not going to cry again. The tears would come later, when no one could see. Not out here. Not under this moon. She turned to leave. Then, hoofbeats. Cora froze. A single rider came up the road, leading a pack mule behind him. He slowed when his eyes caught hers, wary at first. He was young, maybe late 20s, lean but strong-looking. A rifle was strapped to his saddle, and a coat of dust clung to his worn duster. He looked like half the men who passed through this country, except he stopped. He tipped his hat. "Evenin', miss." She stared at him, still half in her veil, her flowers hanging limp in one hand. The cowboy dismounted. He did not ask questions right away. He glanced once at the chapel door, then back at her. "You all right?" "No," she said, voice low. He looked at her for a long moment. "Want to sit down?" "I got coffee in my saddlebag." "I do not want coffee." "Fair enough," he said, not offended. "You want company?" Cora hesitated. Then she nodded, just once. They sat on the chapel steps. He took off his coat and laid it across the wood before she sat. He was quiet, respectful. Let her speak first. "My name is Cora Garrison," she said. "Ira Ellison." His voice was steady, kind. "You were supposed to get married." She nodded. He left. "Hell of a thing to do," he said. She looked at him, tired. "Are you passing through?" "Heading up toward Thompson Falls. Got some cattle to check on for a fella who is paying too much to worry about them himself." She did not respond. They sat in silence for a long time. The moon moved across the sky. Her veil shifted in the breeze. Then Ira spoke again. "You have somewhere to go tonight?" "No." He looked at her, serious now. "You cannot stay out here. It is not safe. Not alone. I do not need saving." "I believe you," he said. "But even the strongest folks need a fire and a roof sometimes. I can ride you into town. There is a boarding house." "I will not stay in that town," she said, voice sharp. They all saw. They all watched him not come. Ira nodded. "All right then. I got a small camp up that ridge. You can ride my mule. Stay the night. I will sleep outside the tent." She looked at him. "Why are you being kind to me?" He shrugged. "Because someone ought to be." It was not the answer she expected, but it was enough. She stood, legs stiff, and he helped her mount the mule. His hand was warm when it steadied her waist. She did not flinch. They rode in silence, the road narrow and rocky. The camp was no more than a canvas tent, a low fire, and a bedroll, but it smelled like coffee and pine and something safer than the chapel had felt. True to his word, Ira rolled out his bedroll beneath the stars, gave her the tent, did not ask questions she was not ready to answer. The fire crackled low. Cora sat just inside the tent flap, veil gone now, dress laid over a rock to dry the hem. "You ever been married?" she asked. "No," he said. "Almost. Years ago." "What happened?" "She died. Fever took her before we made it to the preacher." Cora looked at him, really looked. There was something quiet in his eyes. Not broken. Just worn. Like hers. "I am sorry," she said. "Me too." They were quiet again. Then she said, "I do not want to go back to that town." "You do not have to," he said. "You can come with me. I will take the long road north. You can think about where you want to go." She hesitated. "You do not know me. I do not need to. I can see you are hurting. That is enough for now." Cora looked at the stars. The moon had shifted. The night was deep. "All right," she said. He looked over. "All right, I will go with you." Ira nodded once. "Then get some sleep. We will ride at dawn." Cora did not sleep much, but she rested. And in the morning, When the sun spilled gold over the pines, she rode behind him up the trail, her dress rolled tight in her arms, the chapel far behind. They did not speak of love, but something had started, quiet, like the wind through the grass. And that was enough for now. The trail north climbed slow and steady, cutting through stands of tamarack and fir. By the second day, the air thinned and cooled, and the smell of wet stone threaded through the pines. Cora rode the mule without complaint, her boots dusted and her hands red from the reins. She had braided her hair back with strips of muslin torn from her dress, her veil left behind somewhere below. Ira rode ahead, glancing back just often enough to make sure she was still with him, but not so much as to crowd her. His pack mule followed without fuss, and the mountains stretched wide and blue around them. At midday they stopped where a stream curved through a flat of wild grass. Ira unsaddled the horses and crouched by the water, filling a dinted tin cup and handing it to her. "You ever been this far west?" Cora drank, then wiped her mouth on the back of her hand. "No," he nodded, settling onto a boulder, arms resting on his knees. "It's quieter here. Fewer folks. More space to think." She studied him, then sat across from him in the grass. "What made you come out here the first time?" "Cholera hit our town in Missouri. I was 16. Took both my parents. I had a cousin out in Lewistown who said I could work horses for him. I ran out of family before I ran out of reasons to stay." She looked down at her threadbare skirt. "I ran out of reasons quicker than I planned." Ira didn't speak to fill the silence. He plucked a pine needle and rolled it between his fingers. "You said you were going to Thompson Falls," she said after a while. He nodded. "Man up there's got 200 head on open range. Hired me to check his fence lines. I take the work when it comes. What happens after that? Depends. Might head toward Flathead Lake. Sometimes I ride south if winter's early. I don't stay long anywhere." Cora met his eyes. "Then why offer to bring me with you?" He didn't look away. "Because I don't reckon you deserved what happened. Because I've ridden a lot of miles beside men who'd let a woman fall before they'd offer a hand. I'm not one of them." She stood, brushing her skirt. "And if I wanted to find my own way from here, I'd give you half my provisions, both mules, and I'd walk the rest of the way." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because the world's hard enough without adding to someone's pain." She turned away, jaw tight. "I'm not used to people meaning the things they say." "I don't say much," Ira said, standing. "But I mean every word of it." They rode on. The trail narrowed to a single track along a ridge, and by dusk they found a clearing nestled between two ridges, sheltered by windfall spruce. Ira hobbled the mule and stacked stones around the fire pit while Cora laid out their food. She handed him a strip of venison wrapped in cloth. "You ever think about settling?" "I do." He chewed, thoughtfully. "But I'd have to find a reason strong enough to stop riding." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone again." "I don't expect you to," he said. "Not yet." She lowered her gaze. "What if I never do?" He reached over, gently took the tin plate from her hand, and set it aside. "Then I'll ride beside you as far as you'll let me. No promises. Just time." A breeze moved through the trees, soft but cold. She pulled her shawl tighter. "I won't sleep inside the tent tonight," she said. "You rest there." He didn't argue. Just nodded once and laid his bedroll out near the fire. That night, long after the flames had died to coals, Ira woke to footsteps. He rose partway, hand near his rifle, but it was only Cora. She stood barefoot on the pine needles, shawl wrapped tight, face unreadable in the dark. "I don't want to be alone," she said. He moved aside, made space beside the fire. She didn't touch him, didn't lie down close. Just sat, knees drawn up, eyes on the stars. They did not speak again. But they were no longer strangers. When morning came, she was still there. And when they broke camp, she mounted the mule without hesitation. Neither one said it, but the road ahead no longer felt uncertain. It felt shared. They reached the high country by the fifth morning, pale green meadows dotted with glacier lilies, the snowmelt running fast in narrow veins down the slopes. The peaks loomed sharp behind them, but ahead the land opened into a gentler bowl of pine and stone. Ira led the way without hurry, stopping once to study a broken trail marker carved into a birch trunk. Cora adjusted her saddlebag. "You've been here before." "Twice," he said. "There's an old trapper's cabin another mile west. No one's kept it for years, but it might still stand." She didn't ask more. She watched the way he read the land, how his eyes caught the shift in light through the trees, how his hand rested near the stock of his rifle without ever seeming tense. The cabin was there, half sunk into the slope, its roof bowed under the weight of moss. The door hung askew, but the walls stood, and inside was a stone hearth, a rusted kettle, and a pile of pine needles where a bed once was. Ira pushed the door open with his boot, tested the frame with his shoulder. "Wouldn't trust it against a cougar," he said, "but it'll shelter us from rain." Cora stepped inside and ran her fingers along the rough-hewn wall. "It smells like cedar. Used to be a line cabin." Trapline ran north toward the pass. They unpacked in silence. She swept out the pine needles with a bundle of fir branches while he hauled stones to brace the hearth. He set a fire with dry twigs from beneath the eaves, coaxing it to life with slow patience. That evening, as light faded, Cora walked beyond the cabin, climbing to a rock outcrop above a shallow ravine. She sat, pulling her shawl tight around her shoulders. Ira joined her without speaking, his boots crunching softly over dry grass. "You always travel alone?" she asked, eyes fixed on the horizon, where clouds bruised the sky. "Most times," he said. "I worked with a partner a while back, a Crow man named Matthew. We looked after each other until he went east to see his sister. Never came back out this way. Did you want him to?" Ira squinted at the clouds. "I don't hold folks where they don't want to be." She studied his face. "Is that what you think I am? Someone caught between places?" "I think you're someone who's been split wide open," he said. "And you're trying to find which piece still knows how to breathe." Cora looked away, jaw tightening. "You speak plain." "I've had to," he said. "The world doesn't always listen unless you do." She pulled her knees up to her chest. "I don't know what I want. One moment I want to vanish. The next, I want to build something that can't be taken." He didn't answer at once. "Then, there's room for both, wanting the quiet and the fight." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of oncoming rain. "Ira," she said, voice low, "what would you build if you could stay put?" He was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. But then he said, "A barn with thick beams. A porch that faces west. A well deep enough to last through August." He paused, voice softening. "A table with 2 chairs." She turned toward him. "You ever think about who'd sit in the second one?" He met her gaze. "I didn't, for a long time. But I do now." They sat until the first drops of rain touched their skin. Neither moved. Back inside the cabin, the fire warmed the space enough to drive out the damp. Cora laid out their bedrolls side by side, not touching, but close. Her hands trembled as she folded her shawl. "I don't want to be afraid of trusting someone again," she said. Ira crouched near the fire, feeding it a knot of dry bark. "Then don't rush it. Let it come the way snow melts, slow, quiet, but steady." She lay down without answering. But when the fire dimmed and the dark filled the cabin, her hand reached for his under the blanket between them. She didn't say anything. He didn't move away. They slept like that, 2 souls not healed, but healing. And in the stillness between breaths, something began to root. Not swift, not certain, but real. The days warmed slowly, the snow retreating into gullies and shaded hollows as June deepened. Cora took to rising early, stepping barefoot onto the cabin's threshold to watch the mist lift from the grass. Ira would already be up, tending the horses or sharpening the small hatchet he carried at his belt. They spoke little in the mornings, but the quiet between them had softened into something companionable. One afternoon, after hours spent gathering dry branches from windfall trees, Cora returned with her arms full and found Ira bent over a low bench he had fashioned from 2 stumps and a plank. He was carving something with his knife, blade working slow and careful. She set the wood beside the cabin wall. "What is it?" "Handle for the kettle," he said. "The iron's cracked where the old one was fixed. Figured we'd need a better grip." She watched the curl of shavings fall to the dirt. "You work like someone who plans on staying." He didn't look up. "You thinking of leaving?" "No," she said. "But I don't know what I'm staying for yet." He brushed the wood clean with his thumb. "Then let's build something worth staying for." That night, she brought out a bundle wrapped in cloth from the bottom of her gear. Inside were dried marigold petals, a length of blue thread, and a battered sewing needle. She worked by firelight, folding and stitching fabric into a pouch. Ira glanced over. "You make charms." "My mother did," she said. "For protection. For safe journeys." "What's this one for?" She tied the thread with a small knot. "Deciding." He nodded once, not asking more. By midweek, They had carried stones from the creek to shore up the hearth and stripped bark from fallen cedar to patch the cabin's windward side. Ira felled a dead pine and split the wood by hand. Cora hauled water from the stream, her arms aching by the third trip, but she didn't stop. They cooked together, ate together, and in the evenings they sat on the porch step, listening to the crickets take the dusk. One evening, after a long silence, she said, "I had a brother. He died in Tennessee during the war." Ira didn't shift. "Older or younger?" "Older by 3 years. He taught me how to throw a rock straight and how to lie well enough to get out of chores. He enlisted without telling anyone. My mother stopped speaking for 2 months after the letter came. He waited. I used to think I'd marry a man like him," she said. "Someone who knew his mind, didn't flinch from hard things." "You think I'm like that?" She looked over. "I think you carry your pain quiet. That's not the same as being whole." Ira leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You don't want someone without scars, Cora. I don't want someone who hides them." "I'm not hiding," he said. "I'm waiting until what I say won't be taken as a promise I'm not ready to make." She nodded. "That's fair." The moon rose slow behind the trees, casting silver light across the clearing. She reached over and set the charm she'd made beside him on the step. He picked it up, ran his thumb over the stitches. "What's it say?" "It doesn't say anything," she said. "It just reminds." "Of what?" She looked at him, her voice steady. "That I get to choose what comes next." He didn't answer, but he held the charm a little longer before tucking it into his coat. 2 days later, they found a beaver dam upstream, the water pool deep and clear behind it. Cora took off her boots and waded in, gasping at the cold. Ira watched from the bank, arms crossed, amused. "You're braver than me," he said. "You haul stones like a mule but won't dip your feet? I don't like what I can't see the bottom of." She splashed him. He backed away, laughing, and that laugh low and true stayed with her the rest of the day. That night, as the wind kicked up and the first summer storm rolled distant thunder over the hills, she lay beside him in the cabin, their hands barely touching beneath the blanket. "Ira," she whispered. If I said I wanted to stay," she said, "not just here, but with you, what would you say?" He turned toward her. She could feel the warmth of his breath. "I'd say I've been waiting for you to want that in your own time. And I'd say yes." She didn't cry. She didn't speak again. But she curled into him, and he held her, and the storm passed, and the morning came clean and golden. They had only what they had built with their hands and chosen with their hearts. But it was enough. More than enough. The land turned brighter as July took hold. The wildflowers thickened across the hills, golden bush and prairie smoke curling up through the grass, and the birds returned in full voice, filling the mornings with song before the sun had even cleared the ridge. The cabin, once only a place to rest, now held touches of permanence. 2 shelves mounted by the hearth, a line of tin cups, a curtain Cora had sewn from a flour sack hung over the single window. They had made a rhythm of things. Ira rose first, pulled water, checked the horses. Cora tended the fire, kneaded dough with her forearms dusted in flour. They spoke more now, but not idly. Every word came from their growing comfort, not from need. One afternoon, while Ira stripped bark for a trough he was building, Cora watched from the doorway, her hands busy with patching a shirt of his that had torn near the shoulder. "You ever think about what you'd be, if life had gone another way?" she asked, not looking up from the needle. Ira paused, the draw knife still in his hand. "You mean if I'd stayed back east? If the war hadn't come? If your folks had lived? If you'd never ridden out of Missouri?" He studied the wood a moment. "I might have taken over my father's shop." He made harnesses, mended boots. Not much to it, but he was proud of doing things right. Cora tied off the last stitch and set the shirt aside. "You still do things right." He didn't reply at first. Then, quieter, "Sometimes I wonder if I'd have become cruel, if life had gone easier." She stepped down from the threshold, the mended shirt folded over her arm. "You wouldn't have. You can't know that. I can. Because the man who rode beside me without asking for anything, who split his food and built a table and never once asked more than I could give that man, wouldn't be cruel under any sky." He looked at her then, the knife still in his hand, the sun behind his shoulder. "You make me want to be better than I was. You already are." That night, Ira brought in a bundle of sage he'd found growing along a dry ridge. Cora crushed it in her hands, set a few sprigs above the hearth. The scent filled the cabin, sharp and clean. "We've been here near a month," she said as they sat at the table, the night deep beyond the door. "Is this what staying looks like for you?" Ira leaned back, his hands resting on his thighs. It's the first time it's felt like it could be. Cora ran her fingertips along the wood grain. It's not just the place, Ira. It's you. You're the reason I'm not afraid of standing still anymore. He reached across the table, took her hand. His touch was steady, sure. Then maybe it's time I say it plain. She met his gaze, her breath stilling. I want this life with you. Not just the days and the work, but the quiet, too. The growing old. I want to build more than fences and shelves. I want to build a home with you in it. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. I want that, too. I didn't know I could again, but I do. He stood, came around the table, and she rose to meet him. He folded her into his arms, and she pressed her face to his chest, the steady beat of his heart under her cheek. They didn't speak more that night. They didn't need to. By the end of summer, they'd added a second room to the cabin, small but solid, with a bed they'd built together and a quilt Cora had pieced from old shirts and flower sackcloth. They planted a garden late, but strong beans and squash and a few precious tubers traded from a flathead woman who passed through on her way to the lake. In late September, they rode down to Thompson Falls, where Ira signed rights to a parcel of land near the creek. It wasn't much on paper, but it meant something real. They married in a quiet ceremony behind the mercantile, beneath a cottonwood tree that had begun to turn gold. The preacher's wife gave Cora a ring from her own mother's hand, and Ira carved his initials into the inside of it with the tip of his knife. They returned home without fanfare, but with something stronger than celebration, a peace earned inch by inch. Years passed, and the porch grew wide with worn boards. The garden stretched longer. A swing hung from the eaves, and two chairs sat side by side, facing the sunset. Cora taught herself to read maps and names of birds. Ira built a smokehouse and learned to cure meat the way a Lakota man once taught him in trade for a repaired bridle. They hosted travelers sometimes, fed them stew and coffee, and sent them on their way with patched coats and mended spirits. They never spoke again of the chapel, or the man who fled, or the girl who once stood alone in a dress she had stitched with her own hands. That life had closed, folded into the earth like seed husks after planting. Now there was only this, a small house on a Montana ridge, two people who chose each other, and a love that had not come quick, but had come true. And when the snow came each year, heavy and bright, they stood together at the window, watching the land sleep, hearts full, hands entwined. They were home.